Awesome. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. So I'm Katie Hawkins. Most of you on the call already know me. But for anyone else who may be watching this down the road, I am a health coach. I am a transition coach here at Athlete Soul. I'll also talk about maybe some of the work I do outside of Athlete Soul, which is nutrition and fitness coaching, which I primarily work with women who are like perimenopause or menopausal outside of Athlete Soul. Um, and then I'm also the athlete success manager here at Athlete Soul as well. So I'm the one that you talk to once you become a member and are looking to figure out what programs that we offer that are best for you. So I will have my email at the end of the presentation. So anyone who's interested in learning more about our programs and support can shoot me an email there. But I wanted to talk today about deceleration plan and what that means coming out of sport where you are, high intensity, working out every day, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes all day. It's your main job. Going from your athletic career, depending on what level, to transitioning out where it's no longer your job to be playing that sport anymore. It's no longer your job to train. So, what that means for your body, and basically to not do what I did. Because what I did is the reason why I'm actually here talking to you today. It inspired me to want to help other people do it better for sure. So, a little bit about me. My main sport for the majority of my life was basketball. I grew up playing basketball as my main sport, played in college, and definitely was prepared to graduate and be done. And so I didn't really see it coming how difficult that would be. When I transitioned out, I definitely thought I deserved a break after, working out pretty much every day for 15 years and dedicating my much of my time to that. And so I went from that to not working out at all for several months, thinking that that was the break that I needed. And that was really hard. That it caused a lot of issues that I didn't really correlate with that. And I'll talk about that and kind of what can happen if you do it that way. Unfortunately, for some of us, if you are retiring with an injury, then it may not be your choice that you stop with all of the exercise, especially. And so that can definitely happen as well. I was really lucky that that was not the case. And so what happened was I stopped exercising. I kept eating the same, which is a trap that most of us fall into. It's tough. It can be tough adjusting nutritionally to those changes. I gained weight pretty rapidly. And then all of a sudden I found myself kind of freaking out like, oh my gosh, my body's changing. I didn't see that coming. And I then thought, well, the only thing I'm not doing is the same amount of exercise. And so I threw myself back into trying to train as much as I did while I was competing, which ended up looking like getting up at 4:30 in the morning, going swimming at a local pool for about an hour, getting back home, getting ready for work, biking to work, biking home from work, thinking that that didn't count as exercise because that was a commute, and then going to the gym for about 2 hours, and then coming home and being so exhausted, gorging myself on whatever I had at home because I was so hungry and falling into bed and doing that basically day after day. That is not sustainable. It's not a sustainable way to go. I quickly found that. And although you know, that amount of exercise plus restricting my food intake was able to get back to the weight where I felt like I was back to my competing self, it was not a sustainable way to be living. When you have a career, now you have other obligations, maybe you start a family, whatever it is, it time is not as available. So it was not a sustainable way to go. Then I would get so exhausted or I'd be sick all the time. So then I would stop exercising again and then the weight would return. And I went through that yo-yo dieting over exercising cycle for several years before I just got to this point where I had developed an eating disorder and I looked in the mirror and I was like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible all the time. I hate my body. I never thought I would be here. I didn't recognize myself. And I thought, okay, now I just need to focus on my health and not worry about what I look like. Well, that was its own journey because I didn't know what it meant to be healthy. That's not something that was taught to me. It was always about what do you eat and how do you train for your sport? And that's not always healthy. And so it took a lot of unlearning and it took a lot of me researching, listening to different experts, trying different programs to find a balance that I feel like I had wished I would have had someone that could have just told me what I need to do, who understood who I was as an athlete, who understood my needs in that respect, understood my identity, and also understood what that transition looked like and where I should be. How do I eat healthy? How do I exercise in a way that is for a balanced lifestyle, but also where I feel good, I'm happy with my body, and also enjoy. And that was a really difficult transition. And that is what inspired me to become a health coach and nutrition and fitness coach, is because I really wanted to dig into it and learn more for myself, but I also wanted to help others in this process as well. So I ended up getting my health coaching certification through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. I got my personal training certification through the American Council for Exercise. And then I started working with some people in person at the time before I had my kiddos. And I also wrote a book, The Athlete After, a 10-week guide to balancing life after sports. Now, 10 weeks is pretty quick. I wouldn't expect it to take 10 weeks, but it's a catchy title. And so there is a structure in my book of kind of a plan of attack for that transition that's not just centered around nutrition and exercise, but also around identity and your mindset as well. But I just want to say it takes time. It takes months, even a couple of years as you're transitioning out to kind of figure this stuff out. But my goal today is to give you guys a bit more of a framework to just help put you guys in the right direction. Or if you are someone who helps other athletes in this transition, to be able to share this with them as well. All right. So deceleration. So why it matters is because you're learning this whole new rhythm. You're in a whole new routine. Sometimes it's really challenging because you've had your coach or your whatever your team is structuring your day to day, and all of a sudden you don't have structure anymore when it comes to training, especially. And so we're in this new rhythm. We're trying to figure out a new routine that's going to be balanced with whatever else you've got going on. And you've also got this high output to possibly a sudden stillness if you've decided to just take a break like I did. What that can cause, it can cause hormonal shifts. It can cause a drop in dopamine. It can cause a disruption in your nervous system regulation. And these can appear in different ways. We'll go through it. But without a plan, it can lead to possible injury. It can lead to unwanted weight changes. It can lead to burnout. It can lead to immune system issues. It can lead to anxiety, depression. I didn't list those on here, but there's a lot of things that it could lead to. And so a deceleration plan is basically like putting a plan in place before you are retiring so that you can slowly work yourself down into a balanced lifestyle to honor your body, protect your health, and set you up for success in every aspect. So what you can kind of expect when you step back from sport is a change in your caloric needs. We'll talk about maybe what that looks like depending on what type of athlete you are. Then body composition shifts. There's going to be shifts happening. Muscle loss and fat redistribution is pretty much a common occurrence in this transition as you're figuring out a new routine. Now, does that mean that you will always have less muscle and more fat? No, absolutely not. That's not what that means. I had a really big limiting belief around this. In college, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be as healthy as I am right now because I equated health with working out, training 3 hours a day, and, maintaining a lean body. I was not eating healthy. I was partaking in alcoholic beverages in college. I was not sleeping well. I was under an immense amount of stress. So there is a lot of aspects when I look back that I thought I was a healthy person, but I truly, even though my physique may have looked good, I was not a healthy person. Um, so I had this belief that, oh, well, it only goes down from here. Like it's downhill. And that's not true at all. I now, post having two kids, I'm stronger than I was in college. I'm lifting more. I'm actually working out less time. I have more recovery. I have better sleep, much better nutrition habits, definitely better alcohol habits. And I'm a much healthier version of myself. I actually like my body composition more now. It's sustainable and I'm doing things now physically that I actually never thought I would be able to do in college. If you would have asked me back then, do you foresee yourself ever, riding your bike for 200 miles? I would have been like, absolutely not. You're a crazy person. If would you consider like ever doing an Ironman? I absolutely would not say yes to that. And somehow here I am, but I have a better endurance. I have more muscle than I did back then. So it's definitely a limiting belief that you cannot be more healthy or fit beyond your sport because that's absolutely possible. But it takes a little bit of time in the transition, and there may be some body composition changes that come with that transition as you figure out your new routine. Okay, so hormonally, this is something that isn't talked about very much with the change in intensity and amount of exercise. So when you're a competing athlete, your body's been running on this finely tuned hormonal rhythm that's built around training. Sudden removal of that rhythm is a physiological shock. It's not just a lifestyle change. So if you go from, however much you're putting into your sport, which is a lot, at the college, professional, Olympic level, and then you just stop, that's a huge change, a huge shift, and your body is having to make these drastic adjustments. I'll talk about women first. So, really, both men and women are affected by the estrogen and testosterone drop. For women, estrogen especially, and also because of our hormonal cycles, it can cause more issues. So during heavy training, that can shut down the hormonal signal that drives our entire reproductive system. So for a lot of athletes who are, endurance or maybe aesthetic athletes are more high risk for hypothalamic amenorrhea. That is when you are missing your periods or having irregular periods due to the intense physiological stress of overtraining and often undereating. And that is an issue that can continue forward after your sport is over. It doesn't just disappear because, oh, you're no longer, exercising so hard or because typically too, when a woman is coming out of a sport like that, typically are continuing to eat the same. And sometimes that's under eating. And so that can carry forward. And that's definitely a situation where you would want some professional guidance. Many athletes, treat missing a period as a badge of fitness, but it's actually, it's actually the body saying that something is wrong. Cycles may not automatically return. So for some women, that might take months. And for others, it doesn't happen without medical support. So again, if that's something that you're experiencing, even if you are not retiring from sport right now, that's definitely something to bring up with your medical team and also to be working with somebody as you're coming out of sport. Because the longer that amenorrhea persists, it can affect your bone density, it can affect your heart, it can affect your mood, your cognitive function. And so we really want to make sure we're doing it correctly, where we're increasing your caloric needs at a slow pace to get your body in a better spot, slowly over time so your metabolism can adjust. And also working with deceleration from your exercise as well to work that down in a careful manner. That prolonged hormonal suppression can also affect us in that it can put us into early menopause. So if you're experiencing symptoms and you're like, oh, well, I'm young, This brain fog that I'm experiencing, the sleep disruption, the hot flashes, irregular cycles, if you're experiencing those and you don't know why, that's another reason to bring that up to your doctor. And I just wanted to touch on the female athlete triad. This is something that we talk about. If you've listened to our self-paced course on Mighty Network, we discussed this a little bit, but it's three interconnected conditions. It's low energy availability, low bone density, and menstrual dysfunction. And they kind of feed each other. So stopping training doesn't resolve the triad automatically, and especially if there's restrictive eating patterns that developed. So that's just something that can affect female athletes. But also, it's actually been studied more in a broader version where it can apply to all genders. That's called REDS, relative energy deficiency in sports. So it's something that we're paying attention to now for everybody. Um, in for men, and also this also applies to women as well. But testosterone, heavy training, it can go two ways. Moderate training can increase testosterone. It increases our testosterone. So if training stops abruptly, the body can basically automatically drop in testosterone. Then, but over kind of in a similar way to overtraining, if you have a lot of heavy training over time, it can actually suppress testosterone. And many athletes don't really realize this, but what can happen is that testosterone is actually suppressed and cortisol levels go up. Cortisol is a stress hormone. And so if cortisol is elevated consistently, then testosterone is often decreased consistently. And so again, when you are exiting sport and you are changing the amount of physiological stress on your body, that's not always a bad thing, right? Because it actually decreasing and decelerating your activity can relieve some of that stress. It can actually bring that physiological stress down to get your hormones at a better level. However, if you are just stopping your strength training, then your testosterone can just drop, and that can cause issues like feeling low motivation, brain fog, irritability, reduced libido, muscle loss, and then fat gain, especially around the midsection. So sometimes men attribute those feelings, especially coming out of sport and maybe feeling like, oh my gosh, I went from doing all of this to now I'm not doing anything and now I'm just lazy, or I've lost myself, where a lot of those feelings actually could be hormonal as well. And it's the same thing with women, with that drop in testosterone. Um, Testosterone also drives bone health in men, just as estrogen does in women. So continuing to strength train, this is something that I'll be bringing up, pretty consistently. Continuing to strength train is really important to keep hormonal levels where they need to be. Let's see what else did I want to touch on here. And then also I wanted to touch on, sport culture can condition all of us to suppress how we feel. And so when hormones fluctuate and emotional regulation gets harder, we tend to withdraw or isolate ourselves, or maybe act out. And because we don't really know how to name what's happening with what's going on in our body, we're not really taught that these hormonal changes can be causing these feelings. And so having this physiological explanation can kind of reduce the stigma a little bit about maybe what you're experiencing, and just knowing that these kind of shifts could be happening. So it's really great if you can to get some blood work done coming out of sport, just to kind of see where you are, see where your testosterone levels are, your cortisol, your estradiol, your thyroid, just to know your baseline. Also and I'll touch on this in a bit, but also to get some blood work done around seeing if you're deficient in anything. Are you deficient in like vitamin D? Are you deficient in, in any other vitamins and minerals that you need to be supplementing? So that's another way to kind of figure out, okay, where am I right now? What do I need to do going forward to just support my overall health? Okay. And then I wanted to talk about the dopamine and reward system. So, exercise is one of the most powerful natural dopamine triggers that we have. Regular intense training recalibrates our brain's reward threshold. So, when training stops suddenly, our dopamine drops as well. So, in addition to maybe the hormonal changes we might be experiencing and how that's showing up, the dopamine drop itself can also cause, a reduction in your motivation, mood swings or mood changes. It can also affect your sense of purpose. There's a neurochemical situation going on in your brain. It isn't like a mindset failure. So gradual deceleration allows your brain to find new dopamine sources. So part of the framework would be to find other things that bring you joy. Maybe it's connection, social connection rituals, a creative hobby, movement in other forms, like movement that brings you joy, a sport that you wanted to try that you never got the chance to. Maybe it's dancing, hiking, doing martial arts, whatever it is, finding the things that bring you joy that maybe you weren't able to do before and starting to incorporate those to help with that dopamine response. You don't really want to wait until the training is done completely to do that so that you're kind of already taking root with these different sources. Now, body changes, like I said, are expected and normal, and in many cases can be healthy. Um, when you're transitioning out of this really heavy phase of your life of exercise, right? It's like you really overdevelop that. Now you're kind of coming into this new version of yourself where, okay, you have other things that are taking your energy and focus. You've got maybe a new job, maybe relationships, maybe a family, whatever it may be. There's going to be a shift away from spending so much time on your physical body. And it's going to change. Like your body is going to change because of that. But when it's changing, it's finding its new natural set point. For a long time, it's been kind of held in this state because of how much energy you've put into it. So now it's kind of like, okay, you're finding a more balanced lifestyle. Your body is also kind of finding a more balanced place to be as well. I wanted to talk about the different scenarios that I see of different types of athletes because not every athlete is the same in how they experience this. And even, it goes beyond just breaking it down into aesthetic sports, power sports, and endurance athletes. I mean, everyone's different. Everyone's metabolism is different. Everyone's body is different. Everyone's experience and history with sport and nutrition is different. So this is a general take, but this is what can happen with those athletes who are doing aesthetic sports like gymnastics, dance, and figure skating, those types of things. Those sports typically reward leanness, often from a very, very young age. So for many athletes, the pressure to maintain that specific body composition became internalized as a core part of what it means to be good at their sport. And then also can translate into that leanness is also a representation of how they are good as a person. So a lot of times when I'm working with athletes from this space, there is a lot of work around identity and I mean really with any athlete, but around their body image and separating themselves a bit from what external validation and what that says about them as a person. Um, Post sport, their body will naturally shift towards a more genetic set point, which often means, that it's different than their competition weight. It can feel really uncomfortable and alarming for that person who has always maybe maintained or struggled to maintain a certain weight or size. Um, it's that restriction pattern doesn't just disappear when you come out of your sport. Often it actually intensifies because it feels like now with this loss of as much activity that there's losing control. They're losing control of their schedule. They're losing control of their exercise that was a part of how they maintained this lean body, and food becomes something that they feel they can control. And so that restriction often becomes more so. Um, the mirror can be very triggering. It can trigger grief. Someone who once saw their body as like capable and purposeful may now feel like their body is unfamiliar to them, and it's can be very disorienting. Um, this is the population that is among the highest rate of disordered eating. Um, and clinical eating disorders of any group. So in this deceleration window, they're at the most high risk for that. And so having support structures in place before the transition begins is extremely helpful. So really anyone who's starting the retiring process or who knows they're going to be into it, honestly, having some support from a nutrition coach, or really, I mean, that's what athletes, so that's what we're here for too, in general, can be very, very helpful to just start thinking about these things and start to put some plans in place so that it doesn't feel so jarring and you can start exploring these ideas before it happens. For power sports like, excuse me, football, rugby, weightlifting, those types of sports, a lot of times athletes in these sports are have spent a lot of years getting bigger, building size, building mass, building physical dominance. So something that's very celebrated in those sports, recruited for and rewarded, may in the post-sport world, be where like maybe you don't feel like you fit in as much. Maybe it feels like you're too big or too heavy or out of place. Um, the cultural messaging around size and mass can shift depending on what space you're in. And so that's something that can come into play depending on what sport and what was celebrated. Identity again is deeply embedded. So for many of those power sport athletes, size again is related to identity. It's a sense of safety. It's a social currency, and losing physical form that has carried that identity again is layered with grief, and it goes beyond aesthetics. So in this athlete's transition, typically muscle mass will decrease if you've spent, hours and hours and hours a day, a week, and also lots of calories just to build all this mass. As you're transitioning out, oftentimes that mass is coming down, and some of that's muscle mass, some of that may be fat, whatever it is. That's physiologically normal, but it can feel also again like a loss. Um, Weight gain can also be common. So that's also something that can happen depending on where an athlete is starting from and what their life is going to be looking like. So that can also be an issue. I would say I would put basketball in the power sport category. So for me, I was experiencing, as an athlete who was a post player, I was always told I needed to get bigger. And I was always told, eat more, more, lift heavier. So I was celebrated to be big in my sport. And then I was always told I didn't end up getting big enough. But that's a very different mindset than an aesthetic athlete coming out. So I was always celebrated for just eat, work out, get bigger. And then I didn't want to be bigger when I transitioned out of sport, but I also didn't know how to do that because I was always told to eat more, lift more. And I remember thinking like, I don't actually even know how to exercise when I want my body to change in a way that I want it to be versus what my sport wanted it to be. And I remember going to the gym and them offering me a personal training session for free when I signed up. And I said no, because I was like, well, I've been working out for 15 years. I shouldn't need help. But I really had no clue. I had no idea. And I also felt ashamed around that. I felt like, why I shouldn't need help. Like I don't want to ask for help. I should be able to figure this out. Um, so there's that aspect of it too, of not really knowing where to go or what to do if you want your body to change different than how your sport was. This was me. Some power sport athletes swing toward over-exercise post-career in an attempt to maintain size or control. That was definitely me. And it's, the same kind of identity struggle there. And then for endurance athletes, runners, cyclists, swimmers, endurance athletes often develop a complex relationship with food as fuel as well. So maybe as similar to my experience as a post player, are they're eating large volumes of food. It's normalized, it's necessary for performance. There's kind of this I can eat anything mentality sometimes, especially when you're younger. And your metabolism's a bit faster. So the challenge with that is that post sport, your caloric needs can drop pretty dramatically. So that could be like even 500 to 1,000 calories per day, depending on your training volume. And so, that can lead to significant weight gain if you are going from huge volume output to none at all and you're still eating all of the same amount of food. So that starts that struggle as well. And again, if self-worth is tied to performance and body composition, destabilizing. Um, the reverse can also be true in a similar way, as that if they've lost their license to eat freely, they overcorrect with restriction. So that can also be an issue where it's like, oh, okay, I know I'm not putting in as many miles anymore, so I can't eat this, I can't eat this, I can't eat this. And then there becomes this big swing of under eating. And again, not a sustainable way to be. And it can cause, other issues. The hormonal disruption can accelerate the female triad conditions, all of that. The other struggle is that hunger cues may be unreliable, depending, like really across the board. A lot of times athletes are fueled on a schedule. Maybe they're not listening to hunger cues. If they need to be eating, sometimes hunger cues are suppressed. So sometimes for athletes who have been restricting themselves for so long, they're no longer even feeling hunger cues. I see that happen a lot. So eating by hunger cues can be really challenging. And so we'll talk about kind of some tips on what to do about that, but we want to take some time. It's just going to take time to reconnect with your intuitive hunger. Gut health can also shift. So especially high mileage athletes, their digestive systems have adapted to processing large volumes of food quickly. And as volume decreases, some athletes experience irregularity, GI discomfort, and issues there. So that's also something that can be impacted. So I wanted to talk about what a deceleration plan might look like. Now, again, this is very general because every single athlete is different. But I wanted to just give a framework and some things that I, as a coach, would make sure to be working with someone on in this process. This is a long-term phase. So the deceleration plan, I know this says, 4 to 8 weeks of dropping your training volume, but this takes a long time. If you think about how long you competed in your sport, you're not just gonna, oh, okay, I've got it, like transition overnight. Like 15 years of basketball, it took me, and this was without support, but I would say it probably took me 5 years to go through this process and, fail, feel like I was failing and figure this out on my own until I feel like I had a pretty good handle on it. So definitely getting support is helpful, but don't expect this to be an overnight process. This is something that takes a long period of time to find the right balance for each individual person. Just as a side note, like in my work with outside of Athlete Soul, our programs start at 1 year, and these are not even, some women are athletes, but these are, again, we're looking to build these complete different lifestyle changes and lifestyle habits, and that takes more than just a few months. So a general framework that you could maybe follow would be to reduce your training volume by maybe 20 to 30% each week. You don't, like, the reason it says 4 to 8 weeks is because there comes a point where you're going to hit a spot where you want to maintain. We're not trying to take away all of the training until you get to zero. So we're just gradually reducing for a couple of months to get you to a place where it's a more sustainable balance. And so depending on what that looks like for you, that might be replacing one training session a week with something else. And I'm saying the movement doesn't disappear. You're swapping high intensity workouts that are maybe like 2 hours long with something like walking, swimming, a recreational activity that you have not been able to do because maybe you didn't have time and you wanted to try. maybe join a pickleball league. Who knows? Whatever you want to do, but you're kind of just making these swaps from high intensity, long duration activity to a little bit less. It's not a drastic shift. It's not taking away the workouts completely. It's just making some shifts and also shifting around your exercise in a way that works for your new schedule. Um, we're keeping structure in the week. We are building it into the calendar. That's often some of the hardest part of the transition is no longer having it scheduled. So having like working with a coach to say, okay, this is what I'm doing, laying it in your calendar, literally time blocking it in so that you set this aside the time to do it in addition to whatever else you've got going on. Sometimes people are like, man, I have nothing on the calendar because I'm in the middle of looking for a job or I'm in transition. So then it's easy, to kind of find that time. But especially if you're jumping into a new career or a new schedule, blocking it in can be really, really important. Um, so I wanted to talk about what to focus on and what to keep in there and what's really important. So strength training is super, super important for everything, for your maintaining your hormonal balance, for your dopamine, for your maintaining your muscle mass, for just long-term health, for your bones, for everything. So strength training is an absolute foundation that you should continue doing forever. Forever, forever. So we're not wanting to take out strength training sessions. Now, you don't need to be doing like 2 hour sessions. 45 minutes to an hour is fine. That was a huge mental hurdle for me. I thought if I'm not in the gym for at least 2 hours, what's the point? That's not true at all. It took me a long time to figure that one out because what would happen is I'm like, oh, I don't have 2 hours to go, so I might as well just not go at all. And then I wouldn't do anything. But you don't have to be putting that much time into it. That's why progressive overload, it's about being smarter with your workouts rather than longer with your workouts. So progressive overload is where you are challenging yourself each week in your lifts to go a little bit heavier or a couple more reps to push the weight and to continue to challenge your muscles and to build your muscles. That can also feed that dopamine hit. Like I used to think, oh, I want to do, especially as a personal trainer, I was like, oh, people are paying me. I need to switch it up every single week, different workouts every single week. And I kind of felt the same way. I was like, I just want to do something different. I want to do these things. Well, if you're constantly switching it up, like, yes, that is challenging your muscles in some ways, but it's not the most effective way. Honestly, the most effective way is if you have a program that you're sticking with for 4, 6, 8 weeks, where you actually are doing the same lifts each week and you can continue to push yourself a little bit heavier, a few more reps each time in those same lifts, where you can literally tell if you're getting stronger, that your muscles are that's the quickest way to build muscle mass is by progressive overload. So do you have to do it that way? No. But keep in resistance training and strength training. Maybe it's classes. Maybe if you miss having that team structure, it's signing up for a class that's going to keep you accountable, working out with other people. Sometimes those, workouts aren't necessarily progressive overload, but you're still lifting, you're still doing some circuits, it's still fun, it's still social. Working with a trainer one-on-one is really, really helpful too, because if you are someone who's like me, who's like, oh, I want to change the way my body looks. I no longer want to look like a post player who played college basketball. I want to do this over here. A personal trainer can help you do that, as well as some nutritional help as well. Lean muscle mass, our why should shift. Like a lot of times competing athletes, like our why for doing these things is because we want to perform better. Well, now we're shifting to a health perspective. So we want to just shift our why a little bit. Lean muscle is not just for aesthetics. It is to build more metabolically active tissue. You burn more calories at rest that way. It supports your insulin sensitivity, so it helps prevent chronic disease. It produces your hormones and signaling proteins that affect your whole body health. So it will help you maintain testosterone. It's going to help you regulate your hormonal balance. After the age of 30, everyone loses muscle naturally at roughly 3 to 8% per decade if you are not doing anything. So let me tell you, by the time I get majority of my clients when they are perimenopausal or going into menopause or postmenopause, many of these women have never lifted before or they've not been consistent with it. And let me tell you, you don't want to wait that long. You want to get ahead of it. You want to continue it because you've already lost, but at that point, you have already lost all this muscle mass, and it is hard to build muscle. The older we get, the harder it is to build muscle. So we want to continue that. We want to just keep our body functioning optimally. Muscle is like our biggest form of currency. So continuing strength training is the most important step. It's the strongest predictor of longevity and quality of life. It's actually more predictive than cardiovascular fitness alone, or even your BMI, for survival, for not dying early. So muscle, again, super, super important. It also helps with our bones and keeping our bones strong. Resistance training is the number one intervention for maintaining your bone density. And bone density may not feel like it's like, okay, why do we keep talking about bone density? But let me tell you, when you get to be in your 60s or 70s, you're one fall away from being in a lot of trouble. So maintaining your bone density and strength prevents that fracture risk later on. And that's a huge payoff. So keeping that going. Like I said, it helps with your hormones. It helps with your dopamine. It also helps you with your metabolism. When you can burn more calories at rest, you can eat more. So if you're worried about your weight fluctuations, maintaining your muscle mass or growing your muscle mass is very important for that. The issue with what I see a lot too is when there's a history of that dieting, that yo-yo dieting cycle where we, and I'm talking about even myself, I went through this too, restrict our calories and over exercise, we are not just losing fat when we're calorie restricting, especially if you're not getting enough protein, we're also losing muscle mass. So the problem is that if we're doing that and we're thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to control my weight, I'm going to undereat, which, you know, you don't realize you're undereating possibly. Your weight goes down, yes, but so does your muscle mass. And again, muscle mass doesn't come back easily. So then you stop with your diet because it's not sustainable and you start eating more again. Well, now you've burned through muscle mass that can burn the same amount of calories. So you gain fat back faster. And then it's like, oh my gosh, I just lost this and I gained all this back. Well, I better restrict my calories again and over exercise. The same thing happens again. And so every time we do that cycle, our muscle mass just tanks. And so your resting metabolic rate slows dramatically. And now all of a sudden you can't eat as much food, but you gain fat faster. And then you're calling me when you're like 45 or 50 years old for help. And then it's a whole thing. So keep your muscle mass and don't undereat. Okay, moving on to cardio. So cardio, again, is a big, strong predictor for, against chronic disease, not just heart disease. The good thing is that cardiovascular fitness is actually lost more slowly than muscle mass, but it does decline. So we do want to keep those protective benefits. You just don't have to do quite as much as you probably think. You can do walking. Everyone thinks walking is not enough, but it actually is enough. It's very underrated. Walking is huge because you can get the cardiovascular benefits without the spike in cortisol. So it helps keep your body in the parasympathetic state where your digestion is still good. You can still burn fat. It's a better place for your body to be. And so 7 to 10,000 steps a day, that has been shown to drastically reduce the risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cognitive decline, all of that. I bring that up because a lot of times we are going from a career where we are moving a ton, and you don't even have to think about your steps, right? To then a desk job where all of a sudden you are sedentary all day and you're getting 2,000 to 3,000 steps. And maybe you have your workout planned, but that workout does not have as much of a benefit as moving more throughout the day and getting in a bit of that walking. Your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, we call it your NEAT, is extremely important. That's all the movement that you're getting outside of your planned exercise. And that is pretty critical. We don't have to think about it in sport because we're getting movement all the time. But with a desk job, we're probably losing 1,000 calories of movement. And so making sure that you're still moving around is really, really important. And that's something that I focus on with all clients is just increasing overall movement throughout the day. That could look like walking during your phone calls, taking the stairs when you can, parking further away from the grocery store, setting a timer. If you sit at a desk, setting a timer to get up every 60 to 90 minutes and walk around. That sounds so silly. It sounds like that shouldn't be a game changer. When we're coming from working out 3 or more hours a day to that, to like make sure you get up and walk around every 60 minutes, like it's easy to think, whatever, that's doing nothing for me. But it is actually doing quite a bit. Getting out for a walk is significant. And then doing cardio that you enjoy over intensity is also important for your heart health. So we kind of carry this belief system sometimes that if it isn't hard, it doesn't count. But what I work with on people is changing that mindset. A recreational bike ride, swimming with just for fun, with no pace target, or even just swimming with people you like I swim with my kids. All of these things add up and are important. They might feel anticlimactic, but they are doing a lot for your body. Nutritionally, what I suggest doing is tracking your food for a short period of time, not saying you have to track it forever. For athletes who are transitioning out, it's just a tool for awareness. It is not a tool to shame anyone, to think, oh my gosh, like this is a way to check in with where you are. I have anyone who's working on nutrition with me, you're going to track your food because otherwise, like, how are you going to know? How am I going to know what you're doing? I'm not here to shame anyone with what they eat. I want to take away a stigma around food, like, oh, there's good foods and there's bad foods. We want to take that stigma away. This is more just about seeing where you are, and so that we can adjust if we need to based on lifestyle changes like lighter workouts, things like that. Um, I put up here the very general recommendations. So like if you are tracking and you're just checking in with yourself, you're kind of looking to see if you're within these ranges. And if you're not, then that might just signal some changes that you maybe want to make. I follow the International Society of Sports Nutrition for how much protein to be getting. Now, it could be a little bit more depending on if you're a menopausal woman, because as we get older, we don't absorb protein as easily. So it's better to get a little more of a buffer. But about 0.6 to 0.9 grams per pound of body weight, that's where majority of people should fall if you're still wanting to have enough to gain some muscle mass. Half your body weight in grams is enough to sustain your muscle mass. But 0.6 to 0.9, that's what we're kind of looking for. Protein remains critical in the post-sport world and in life in general. So protein, you probably hear it all over the place. All foods have protein now. They're injecting protein into foods at this point. Your body's adapting. Your muscle tissue is adapting. Your hormones are adapting. And the amino acids that you get from protein are really, critical for this process. It's also the most satiating macronutrient. So keeping protein in each of your meals will help level your blood sugar. It'll help reduce cravings. And so things, obviously foods that, well, I say obviously, but I shouldn't assume that everyone knows. Protein can come from animal proteins like chicken, fish, beef, cottage cheese, eggs, Greek yogurt, legumes, tofu. There's a lot of different sources. And this is another benefit to tracking because you start learning what's in your food. For fat, very kind of a wide window here because again, this really kind of depends on where you are starting from, where you're eating. If you're a woman, if you're a man, this is a wide range. Basically, I would cap if you're eating more than 80 grams of fat per day, that's just something that I would kind of maybe reel it in a little bit. If you're eating under 50 as a woman, that's going to have some hormonal implications. So you want to be getting at least 45 or 50 grams as a woman to support your hormones. So that's why I kind of have this wide range here. Um, but dietary fat is really essential for hormone production like estrogen, testosterone, and your cortisol. And so you want to be getting healthy fats like you want to be getting avocado, olive oil, nuts, seeds, fatty fish, that those types of foods. Um, for fiber, this is important because as your training volume drops, your gut motility slows down and your digestive system that was accustomed to all of that mechanical stimulation of high activity, your fiber is going to help maintain that regularity in the transition. And so fiber is probably like something that most people have never really paid attention to, but it's going to help with your gut health. It's going to help with your blood sugar regulation. And that is coming from your vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, oats, seeds. So that is a number to be watching out for. 25 grams is the recommended amount across the board or more. So that's a pretty easy one to be looking for. Carbohydrates really is just going to fill in depending on where you are starting from, where you're at, how much activity you're doing. It may be very different from a man to a woman to an aesthetic athlete to power athlete, like where you're coming from. Um, so that one's pretty variable, but you want to be focusing on those carbs that have high fiber. So a lot of times it's going to be again those fruits, vegetables, whole grains. That's where a lot of your fiber is going to come from. So if you're focused on fiber, likely your carbohydrates are going to be coming from those whole foods, which is the kind that you want for the majority of your diet. The biggest thing is eating enough food. I would say 95% of women who I start coaching are not eating enough, and we spend a significant amount of time retraining metabolism to eating enough of the right foods. Um, don't think of foods as good or bad. That doesn't serve very well. Food has different purposes, and sometimes we want to incorporate more foods than others to reach the goals, the health goals, or the aesthetic goals that we want. Getting blood work done, checking your iron, your vitamin D, your B12, magnesium, just to see if you're depleted, because that would help to know that if those are things that you need to replenish. Um, and it can also help with whatever maybe your mood swings or how you're feeling. If you're not getting enough of like magnesium or B12, that can very much help. And then lastly, leaning on your support. If you are coming out of sport with an injury and it's like, okay, now you finally have some time to rehab, maybe you have a physical therapist or a chiropractor or somebody who is helping you rehab from your injuries. Maybe you get blood work from your medical team to help find any deficiencies or hormonal imbalances that you can work on correcting. Maybe you hire a personal trainer or health coach if you're able to help kind of figure out the new exercise routines or nutrition that is going to work best for you to build a personalized deceleration plan that's specific to you. Maybe you are working with a psychotherapist or a counselor on the emotional piece of this transition. There's going to be grief. That's something that we talk about a lot of this process, what to expect emotionally in this transition. And of course, we're here for you. Athlete Soul's here for you to support you as well. So we have our group program, we've got our self-paced course, we have our one-on-one programs, and a lot of programs are resources on our website and on Mighty Network as well. So building a team around this can really be helpful, and leaning into that and just knowing that this is something that all athletes go through and you're not alone. So if you'd like more information, more resources, you can check out our website. You can also email me if you have any specific questions or if you're interested in learning more about our programs and how we can help. But we have like 3 minutes for questions if anyone has any. That's a lot of information to throw at you. Awesome. All right. Well, also, if you think of any questions that you might have, feel free to email me. And yeah, any other announcements, Miriam?
Uh, Anything in particular. Like you said, if anybody has any question, they can reach out to you directly for some advice.
Great. Oh, there was a couple, I didn't see the chat. Oh, okay. Great. Awesome. No questions. Great. Well, everyone, enjoy the rest of your Friday. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Katie.
No problem. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Katie.